Unbeknownst to me, in 2022, I was in pretty rough shape. I was exhausted, I was struggling with my job, and I wasn't taking care of myself. For quite a while, I couldn't actually feel my arms, and I felt like there was a pretty heavy pressure in my chest. And to be honest, I thought I had like a fairly serious disease, but I was too afraid to go get checked. It was at that time I made one of the toughest decisions in my life, but ultimately I know it was one of the best decisions I ever made, and it was to submit paperwork for an occupational stress injury and go off work. It took quite a few conversations, a lot of nudges, some chats with friends and family, and ultimately someone giving me permission to take care of myself instead of taking care of everybody else. I attended the BC Firefighter Resiliency Program in Maple Ridge, and it was there that I learned fundamental changes. I learned how to communicate differently, how to listen to understand what someone's saying instead of listening to respond and fix. I dumped a ton of stuff out there that I didn't even realize I was carrying. It was then that I started reading Anne Berube's Burnout Antidote, attended one of her workshops, and since then I've been working extensively in what I like to call, like in our world, an unconventional approach to self-care and peer support. It took 5 months and 18 days to get myself back to work, and when I did get back, I wasn't sure how it would go. I don't say I had doubt, but I had concern of how would I respond, how would I react? What would that first life-threatening situation feel like? Would I freeze or would I do okay? And it wasn't long after being back that I responded with my crew to a fairly significant traumatic call. Spare you the intense details, but for the framework of it, it was a car versus a pedestrian at a high-hit intersection where the car was doing about 80 kilometers an hour. And when we arrived, the patient was alive, but ultimately didn't survive. Once we cleared the scene, I put in a call for our peer support critical incident stress team, and unfortunately they were tied up dealing with a fatality on the other side of the city. So with a long background in peer support, I asked my crew, like, while we're waiting, do you want me to try to run a bit of a diffusing the traditional way? And how we see those diffusings is typically, what were you doing when the call came in? What did you do at the call, and how do you feel now? And I also offered, if they wanted to try something, we could try some of the stuff I learned while I was off work. And that's what they decided to do. So I started it off first and began by saying, as soon as the call came in, this is what I felt. I felt dread because I knew the intersection and I hope it wasn't going to be as bad as I thought. I felt overwhelmed when we got there and realized it was worse than I could have ever imagined. I felt frustration because we exhausted what we could do to help this person, and we were all by ourselves waiting. I felt relief when I could hear the ambulance siren getting closer. I felt sadness when I looked at what had happened to this young man. I thought about his family. And I had some younger firefighters on my crew that day, and the look on their face, it was like watching a little bit of their innocence go away. I felt pride in what we did and what everybody on scene did to try to help that young man. We went around the circle in the station, and each one of the crew members tried it this new way. After they were done, they asked, is there a way that when we get home, we can do something different with our family? So I offered the same thing. Yeah, like, you don't need to go home and do a trauma dump with all the details. You don't need to go home and say nothing at all, because they're gonna tell that something happened. So what they did was they went home and said, you know, what they individually felt. They left the details out of it. They told the people at home what they needed, whether it was some alone time, a bit of patience, or a little bit of understanding that they just witnessed something pretty intense. They went home and tried it, and they were able to get from their family exactly what they needed. And when they came back, it was like, why didn't we ever be told, or why weren't we told how to do this before? You were told now, so now you can share it around as you go. When you witness something traumatic happen to another human, it's a totally human response to not be 100% right away. And a lot of times we're expected to just jump right back in. By going home and telling their families what they went through and telling them what they needed, it not only helped them process the event, but it helped keep that connection with their family members. So they didn't have to worry about or wonder what their family member had gone through or what they saw or why they're acting differently today. So when we create communication and understanding, it does make our home life and our work life much better. If we know what someone needs, we can be there to support them, whether they be a coworker, a family member, or a friend. So the process that I'm kind of trying to describe is acknowledging that traumatic event, matching it with the emotion or the feeling that you're going through. And it's a way of addressing and processing unaddressed or suppressed memories or feelings. And I think the stakes are high when we don't do it, because unknowingly we stay hurt or we compound existing injuries. We risk losing the relationship with ourselves and everybody around us. And I think that's the essence of what I'm trying to say is just because we've done something a certain way doesn't mean that we can't evolve it, doesn't mean that we can't change it. And when we do that, we all grow together. We keep those relationships important, we keep them intact, and we go home and continue on with what it is we love to do. Thank you. Yeah.